and welcome back to another session of English with me. So last time we talked about a commentary on the poem by Pablo Neruda that I wrote, and I wrote the commentary when I was in 11th grade, so near the beginning of my IB English journey. It was the first commentary that I'd written on a poem that I wasn't given. So now today I'm going to look at another commentary that I did when I was in 12th grade and was obviously a lot more mature in terms of my commentary writing abilities. So this was sort of meant to emulate the actual IB exam method, in that we were unfamiliar with the poem or the poet beforehand. So last time I mentioned that even though I had not read the poem beforehand, I knew the poet and therefore knew some elements from his work that would carry through. So for example, I knew that Pablo Neruda had a tendency to use a lot of nature comparisons. I knew that he liked to use a lot of personification and things like that. Whereas for this poem, the name is Patchwork by Eavan Boland. I had no idea who the poet was. I had never heard of this poem. It was completely new to us, just like the poem will be when you do the IB end of year May exam. So again, I did pretty well on this commentary. I received a 19 out of 20, which is again a 99%, and this was when obviously a lot of people, everyone else also had more experience with commentary. So this would have been when she was working a little bit harder. Unfortunately, I don't seem to have the poem with me, but if you do search it up, you'll notice that it is a very free verse. It is a very modern sort of poem. I want to just talk a little bit about the thing with a modern poem, which is that it has a lot less structure, sort of just by its nature. So a lot of the times when you're looking at older poems, when you're looking at a lot of older poems, you would tend to focus on sometimes the meter, what is the meter, is there any breaks in the meter, and also looking at the rhyme scheme. But for a lot of more modern poems, there isn't a rhyme scheme and there isn't a regular meter, just because that's not the style that is written anymore. So that makes it harder sometimes when you're talking about structure, but because it seems a lot more like prose, and it lacks that distinctive structure that you would typically associate with a poem. That being said, when you are writing a commentary, no matter what the poem is like, you do need to talk about both actually what's being said and also about the structure. So this will also serve as an example of how to talk about the structure of a poem, even when it's a modern poem and doesn't have that much meter or rhyme or a regular stanza structure. Alright, so I'm just going to dive into reading. So in accordance with its title, Eavan Boland's Patchwork is a free verse poem that follows the narrator's inner musings while creating a patchwork pattern at night. As the narration delves into deeper considerations about the nature of the universe, literary techniques such as contrast, diction, and sentence structure are evolved to express the idea that order within the universe only becomes apparent once the observer takes a step back from seeking total control. And my teacher commented, nice opening. Throughout the poem, several key contrasts serve to illustrate the contradictions that one may face if they seek to enforce their sense of reason. Our first contrast is the description of the Laura Ashley cottons as trash bags, line 7. Even though it is actually a well-known brand, and the narrator's desire to use it in their craft, as well as the use of the word sumptuous, indicates an appreciation for it. In this case, the trash is more likely to stem from the fact that the fabrics have yet to be used by a human, and therefore placed in order. This shows the narrator's perception that even something splendid, if not placed in order, is nothing more than trash, indicating her desire to be in control. Next, the narrator states in line 17 that she faces away from the dark, but acknowledges later that there are also stars, and swiftness and brightness. The contrast of light and dark shows the irony that when a person tries to accomplish one thing, in this case avoiding the darkness, they may end up achieving the opposite of the desired effect, i.e. missing out on the light as well. This is proven later in the poem, when the patchwork is given good light by the night sky, only when it is laid across the floor, lines 32 to 33, which is the point at which the narrator has relinquished control. Finally, there is contrast between shapes and colors at multiple points while the patchwork is in progress. For example, when she mentions greens and pinks and burgundies and whites, lines 28 to 29, and sphere on square, line 34. This shows that while the person is working with the fabric, some of the patterns seem as though they will be contradictory and have no reason in it, line 31. But once it is viewed as a finished product, the pieces will fit together and it will make sense. Thus, it is shown through contrast that when one tries too hard to force a sense of order and reason, it will often yield contradictory results. That was the first body paragraph. Next body paragraph. Next, the use of diction further highlights the motif of control as well as the idea of predestination by the universe. The starting line uses parallelism and the repetition of universe and random to show that while a person's thoughts may be random, the universe is much more structured. The poem goes on to describe the narrator's thoughts in first person to give a sense of speaking intimately with the audience, while freely expressing her doubts and uncertainties. For example, the line in parentheses in line 5 seems almost as if a shared secret between the reader and the narrator, in which the word presumption shows the narrator's uncertainty about her conclusions. The expression of this uncertainty, only as an aside, however, shows the narrator's desire to outwardly appear assured in their judgment. Throughout the poem, there is also a transition from active words when referring to the fabrics in stanzas 3 and 7, cut, stitched, patched, logging, cutting, etc., to more passive diction in the second last stanza, laid and spread, which indicates the removal of the narrator's influence over the bag. This is coupled with a transition from past and present tense in the start of the poem, I have been thinking, line 1, my back is to the dark, line 17, to future tense, in lines 23 and 38. The use of future tense as statements indicates certainty about the future and a sense of predetermined fate. At the end, the use of bits and pieces, lines 39 to 40, also highlights the difference between the random and the predestined, with bits lacking reason, while pieces have a specified purpose. This shows that even fabrics can have a destined purpose as ordained by the universe. When the two transitions, active to passive and present to future, are placed in conjunction, it demonstrates that the narrator becomes more aware of order within the universe only when she lets go of having absolute control. Therefore, the choice of diction as well as changes in diction demonstrates the simultaneity of a person relinquishing power and realizing the hidden order within the natural world. Last body paragraph. Finally, the use of sentence structure in the poem forces the consideration of certainty versus uncertainty as well as the complexity that can be found in a seemingly simple task. To begin, the use of brackets in the fifth line serves to give the sense that the narrator is trying to tell the reader a secret, a fact in secret, and the use of a period as opposed to a dash at the end of line 4 shows that the only thing that the narrator is certain about is their uncertainty. The use of the question mark in line 22 also depicts uncertainty about whether the patchwork is craft, which is more based on human utility and art, than a much more complex and abstract entity. This is thus able to symbolize the narrator's questioning of the extent of the influence of the abstract, which drives what we know as art. The use of single sentence stanzas, such as in line 22, as alternating with longer stanzas, creates the effect of seeming like conclusions that the narrator makes, due to their directness. The fact that someone later contradicted their pieces fitting together invalidates the assertion that there is no reason, then shows the shortcoming of some of these simple conclusions. On the other hand, when the universe is described, it is often in the form of long lists, such as in stanzas 6 and 10, which suggests a certain vastness to the underlying order, especially when there is repetition, such as stars and bits of stars and little bits of bits, lines 19 to 20. Therefore, the simple conclusions of the narrator are contrasted with the complexity of the universe through sentence structure, with the use of punctuation highlighting this uncertainty. Overall, Boland uses contrast, diction, and sentence structure in the poem Patchwork, indicating that a person often needs to let go of control and previous conclusions in order to appreciate the order and reason of the universe. This order is relevant and can be found even through the simplest tasks, such as patchwork, through enough introspection and openness on the part of the individual. So that is my commentary. As you can see, I used a slightly different way of organizing it, and this time I organized it by technique. And compared to the previous commentary, it was actually much better organized, in which it was very specified that the first paragraph is about contradictions, about contrasts and contradictions. The second one is about the use of diction, and the last one is about sentence structure and also punctuation. So in this case, the organization, the structure of my commentary is much more clear, and again, I had a much stronger introduction, I would say. The one piece of feedback that my teacher did give me was that at the very end of my last body paragraph, I needed to bring it back to my central assertion. So that was one instance in which I kind of overlooked the necessity to relate everything back to my central assertion. And that, again, as I mentioned last time, is a very important part of writing any commentary. That you have to constantly ask yourself, so what? So when you bring up a quote, you ask, so what does the quote show? And once you identify what the quote shows, you ask, so what? Like, what does it matter? Why does it matter that this quote shows this, or that this quote has this effect? So that was my second commentary on this poem, and this poem was actually, I think, the format of this commentary is much more similar to what I would have gotten on the IB exam. So hopefully me talking about my commentaries and about the things I did well and didn't do well with them will help you learn how to structure your commentary. And again, I encourage you to search up the poem. I will write the author, the poet, and also the title of it in the description. So I would encourage you to look at it and try to write a commentary, or at least think about how you would write a commentary on your own. Yeah.